Hello, you wonderful people. How's it going? Welcome to D&D Optimized, the show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and we crunch numbers and we theory craft, and we try our best to make those characters as powerful as possible for the role that we've chosen to fit them in. So if you enjoy the character creation aspect of D&D and making new characters and theorizing about how to make really cool, fun, powerful characters, as much or almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game, well, welcome home. This is the place for you. So we're super happy to have you. My name is Colby, and I'm your host, so thanks for being here. Before we jump in, thank you, everybody, for your support. Please subscribe and like if you enjoy the content. And check out other videos and share and comment and all of the things. We're still growing nicely and a little bit more quickly every week, and I love it. Thank you. We're getting close to 5,000 subscribers, and I actually have a little surprise for when we do. Hopefully that will be sometime in the next couple of weeks or so. So stay tuned for that. All right. So I put up another poll last week to see what everybody wanted me to do for my next build. And after 1,200 votes, which is the most I've had to date anyway, we've got a winner. Now, FYI, thank you for voting and even liking and commenting on that. I think it's good for the YouTube algorithm. They tend to, those community things like polls and little pictures and things like that I post tend to only show up on your feed if you're using YouTube via mobile. If you're on an actual computer, you can access those. You just have to go to my channel and go to the community tab, and you'll see kind of little updates and things like that I post if you're curious to check them out. No big deal. But anyway, I do try to post something every 2 or 3 days just to kind of keep up the interactions, and thank you for interacting back. It's good. It's good for us. Anyway, after over 1,200 votes to date, the winner was the Mage Hunter, Mage Slayer, Anti-Mage, kind of a character that's specifically built to be good against enemy spellcasters. So, ever the man who tries to please his audience, that's what we're going to do our episode on today. Now, I've got a confession to make. As much as I love this character concept, and I do, I really had a hard time coming up with a way to build the character in a way that was sort of quantifiable, right? As most of you know, a big part of what I do on this show is to get really crunchy with the numbers and not only try to figure out how much damage a character might do, but at each level and at different enemy armor classes and things like that, or also how much damage they might take if I'm building if I'm creating a character specifically designed to be sort of a tank build. I want to know how much damage are they going to take each round versus some hypothetical monsters or combat encounters. How long is it going to take them to die, right? And things like that. And this build was very challenging because, initially I thought, okay, if they're going to be really good at being sort of an anti-mage, then they need to be bursty, right, and have good burst damage. But the more I thought about it and started, sort of researching and digging in, the more I think I really realized that in 5e, there aren't a lot of features or subclasses or things like that are really designed to help a character do more damage to an enemy spellcaster, other than the Mage Slayer feat. Someone will probably correct me on that, I'm sure, and point out something that is specifically designed to help you do more damage to spellcasters and not other characters, right? And so it felt a little weird to try and just create like a burst damage character that I'm going to say, okay, and this is my anti-mage, right? Because it could also be an anti just about anything. They're just focused on burst damage. And so then I kind of thought, well, maybe, I mean, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of things that a character designed to be an anti-mage would want in their arsenal, no question. It's just that not a lot, if any of them outside that feat, are necessarily designed to be like help you do more damage to spellcasters, right? And so then I thought, well, maybe I need to sort of build them as a kind of a tank character and compare them to other tanks. Because the comparing to other characters with the same sort of goal is for me one of the most important parts and most interesting things about kind of the numbers, right, in the first place. The problem with comparing them to other tanks is that thus far, the few tank builds that I've done, there's only been 3, but they have been they have been almost exclusively focused on being tanky against enemy weapon attacks, right? And I admit that's an oversight, I think, on my part. But all of the sort of control combat encounters that I was hypothetically putting my tanks up against were all like weapon-based damage, right? And there was no real save or take damage from spells component to that. And so when I was creating this Anti-Mage, a lot of, and trying to sort of get my checklist of things that are important for, someone that's good against spellcasters, I was having a hard time sort of getting all of those boxes checked, and also, getting my character a really high armor class. It's possible. But in order to do it, I was sort of having to multi-class and sort of twist and turn and kind of create this hybrid-y, weird, kind of tanky Anti-Mage thing, and it didn't feel right to me. The concept was getting convoluted. So at the end of the day, for the second time only on this channel thus far, the first being my support bard build, I'm not really going to be comparing this character numbers wise to like other, I guess, archetypes in the game, right? Tank or bursty or sustained damage or anything like that. Their damage is going to be pretty good. They're going to be okay tanky, but they will pale in comparison for enemy weapon damage, against enemy weapon damage anyway, to other tank builds that I've done, and so it just doesn't feel particularly useful to sort of look at those numbers, because that wasn't really the intent of the design, and so they just don't really add up, right? They don't match up, they don't stack up very well. I am going to look at damage taken per round and rounds to die, sort of my tank stats, right? But only against a hypothetical, never-ending fireball machine, basically, and crunch those numbers and say, okay, if this character were to get hit by an enemy fireball, or have a caster cast an enemy fireball at them every single round, what kind of damage would they be taking per round, and how long would it then take them to die? And I do want to compare that to other tank builds and see, how much better they fare, because they do, against other builds that were supposedly designed to be hard to kill. In the end, this character was not necessarily meant to be the best tank ever, or the best sustained damage dealer ever, or even the best burst damage dealer ever. They were designed for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to hunt spellcasters, to stick to them like glue, to be able to shrug off just about any spell that a caster can throw at them, and just to disrupt them and make their lives miserable, and ultimately take them out. And that is difficult to quantify, right? It's difficult to ask the question, well, how good is this character at, sticking to an enemy spellcaster and resisting most of the damage and control that a caster might throw at them? 25. There's not a lot of numbers for me to hold on to there. So anyway, it's difficult to quantify in a particularly effective way, but it doesn't mean that the character isn't incredibly effective at what they do. So in order to create the best Anti-Mage possible, I first had to come up, I think, with a sort of checklist, like I mentioned, of features and abilities that I think it would be important for such a character concept. Here's what I've come up with. First of all, they need like bonuses and or advantages to saving throws against spells. They need evasion or an evasion-like ability, which we'll explain for those who don't know what that is. We want resistance to spell damage as much as we can get. We want ways to reduce damage from spell attacks that are sort of targeted single attacks, right? We definitely want ways to effectively stick to the target by either snaring them or maybe being able to teleport to them if they teleport away, preferably both. We want ways to prevent or negate spells, counterspell, dispel magic, silence, those types of things that will prevent spells from happening in the first place. We want great ways to break concentration if an enemy caster is concentrating on a spell. And then, of course, we need survivability and we need good damage potential so that we can ultimately take the enemy spellcaster out. With that checklist in mind, I actually ended up coming up with 2 character builds that I think check all of those boxes. I like one better than the other, and I think the primary reason is because I was a big fan of the Anti-Mage character in the Warcraft 3 mod Defense of the Ancients, for those who are familiar with that. Valve also created Dota, right? Dota 2, I guess, or whatever, and it's very popular. And the one of these builds kind of has a very similar feel to that. I think I was probably, whether consciously or subconsciously, inspired by that character and the concept, the sort of assassin-y, very mobile type of character concept. There is a different version that I'll mention in the final thoughts if you want to stick around for that. That actually ends up being a little bit better of sort of an overall general tank. They're just a little beefier and a little more platey and shieldy and a little less assassin-y. And so anyway, preamble out of the way, I present episode 29, the Anti-Mage. So let's jump into the build. All right, at level 1, for our class, we are going to start off as a rogue. We are going to be multi-classing, no surprise to anyone. But I wanted to start rogue primarily for their superior proficiencies. They get more proficiencies, including weapons and tools and more skills. And that's really nice. This character, by the way, can absolutely function as the party's rogue for all things sneaky, lockpicky, disarm, trappy, as well as make an okay tank, particularly after the mid-game. Early on, not so much. But against mages, of course, yes. But otherwise, not until we hit kind of mid-game will they get decently tanky. Race. Of course, custom... No! We're not doing custom lineage. I know. Sorry if I scared the baby. We are going Yuan freaking T. Pureblood. Why? Naturally, because you get advantage on saving throws against spells and spell effects. So that's amazing. You could, of course, take a satyr as well for that same benefit. But I think the Yuan T Pureblood is superior here. I think thematically it just fits better. It just feels a little more slinky assassin-y, which is kind of what I'm going for here. But they get some nice utility from their innate spellcasting. I'm not going to really go into it, but most importantly, I think, when compared to the satyr, they are immune to poison damage and being poisoned. And there are plenty of spells out there that do poison damage, and so having immunity from the get-go to one of those potential damage types is fantastic for us. Now, there is actually an argument for going variant human here. I know, but hear me out. If we went variant human, the free feat that we would be taking is Mage Slayer, right? Which gives us advantage on our saving throws against spells, just like the ratio from the Yuan T, but only if the spell was cast by a creature within 5 feet. And so, in my mind, it's inferior. Yes, we are going to do our best and be pretty effective at staying close to our targets, but there's not always a guarantee that you're going to be able to do it. Sometimes the mage is going to, teleport away and get a spell off, or there will be multiple mages, or it'll be the start of combat and you're, 50 feet away from them and they'll cast a spell. So I wanted to have that advantage all the time. So yes, this is what I'm telling you. I'm building a mage hunter, mage slayer, and I'm not taking the mage slayer feat. You idiot. Here's the thing. Like I said, the advantage is only if you stay within 5 feet. And if we took that feat and we were UNT, that aspect of the feat would be redundant. The other things that we get from the feat are, when they cast a spell and we're next to them, we can essentially use our reaction to make an opportunity attack against them. That's great, except this build is going to have a lot of uses for its reaction, and I want to save that. I want to hold on to that for defensive purposes. Yes, we would get that extra attack off sometimes, but I worry that we would use it and do that, and then we'd regret it and wish that we still had our reaction in order to sort of help defend against incoming spells and things. So I don't know how much we'd actually be getting that extra attack off. The other benefit that you have is when you hit a creature within 5 feet of you that is concentrating on a spell, they have disadvantage on maintaining concentration. That's fantastic. However, this build has a pretty innate concentration disruptor built into it already. We won't get it for a few levels, but we'll get there relatively soon. And so that even feels a little bit redundant to me. It would definitely be nice, but we kind of get that interruption from another place, and we're making lots of attacks that's going to impose lots of concentration checks. So I'm just not that worried about disrupting the concentration that a caster may have. And so all of those things said, I'm not going to take the Mage Slayer feat. I think it's going to be better put to increasing our abilities and our ability scores. So we're going UNT for the race. If you wanted to do slightly more damage at the risk of being a little less tanky against spells, go ahead and take Variant Human and take the Mage Slayer feat as your free feat. We're going Snake Human, which is way cooler. Abilities. For your ability scores, assuming point buy as always, go 14 dex, and then you get a +2 and a +1 from the pure blood, right? You get better stat bonuses too. So 14 dex +2, 15 wisdom +1. Wisdom saves are important to not get yourself mind controlled and charmed and things, but we've got another reason for having a good wisdom score, which I'll get to in a moment, and give yourself a 14 constitution because hit points are good. Equipment. Make sure that you get yourself a rapier, 2 short swords, thieves' tools, if you need to be the party rogue anyway, and leather armor. And then rogues at level 1 get expertise, which basically lets you double your proficiency bonus on a skill that you are proficient in, or your thieves' tools checks. I'm going to go stealth and thieves' tools because I'm assuming that I'm kind of doubling as the party rogue here. And of course, rogues at level 1 get sneak attack, and this was another big reason to start rogue because it gives us a nice little damage bump early on. Again, if you have advantage on your attack, or the enemy that you're attacking is within 5 feet of one of your allies, then you get to do sneak attack damage, which is an extra 1d6 once per turn on an attack that you make, as long as it's with a finesse weapon. At level 2, we're going to take a level in Monk. So we are a Monk 1. When we met our hero, or maybe anti-hero, they were a shady type. They were roguish. Now they have heard about a monastery, or perhaps met someone from said monastery that teaches things that sound particularly useful for their line of work. Not one of those crappy, stare out of your third eye and find inner peace monkish monasteries, but these monks teach you how to make your body a weapon and draw on your body's energy to make you one with the shadows and give you incredible power. And so you begin your monkish journey. Monks give us a lot of things we need off of our Anti-Mage checklist, especially the subclass that we're going for. So at level 1, monks get unarmored defense. It lets us throw off our leather armor and now add our wisdom modifier in addition to our dexterity modifier to our armor class. So with a 16 dex and a 16 wisdom, we have a 16 armor class, which is not fantastic, but it's better than it was, and it will get better. We also get the martial arts feature, which lets us use our dexterity for unarmed strikes. Everybody else has to use their strength score for unarmed strikes, right? And we get, when we attack, we can make a bonus action unarmed strike that lets us add our dex mod, and it's a d4. It does a d4 of damage, and that will scale with monk levels as well. You can't use your rapier just yet because it's not a monk weapon, and we only get martial arts benefits if we're using monk weapons. So for now, short sword. We're doing a short sword attack action plus sneak attack damage if it hits, plus an unarmed strike bonus attack. Pretty decent damage for level 2. At level 3, you are a monk 2, and thanks to Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, there is a new optional feature that we're going to take, which basically says that any weapon can be a monk weapon if you focus on it. Not any weapon, but a rapier can. And so we're going to start using our rapier from here and call it our monk weapon. It gives us a teeny bit of damage bump from our attacks and still allows us to get sneak attack damage because rapiers are finesse, and get a bonus action unarmed strike. We also get key points. Key, as I'm sure most of you know, is the monk's resource that we use to fuel all of our most potent abilities. They work very similarly to like spell slots, right? They refresh on a short rest, which is important. And hopefully you can convince your companions and your DM to let you get lots of short rests so you can use your key points as much as possible, because you just don't get enough of them. I think the biggest complaint that I have, that most people have who claim that monks could use a little bump in the power from Wizards of the Coast, would say that they don't get enough key points, or that their abilities cost too many key points, things like that. For now, we can spend our key points on 3 things. Flurry of Blows, which basically says that when you are making an unarmed strike as a bonus action, if you spend a key point, you can make 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action, which is great. More damage and more chances to interrupt, our spellcaster concentration and things. We get Patient Defense, which lets you spend a key point and then dodge as a bonus action, right? Usually dodge requires an action, and it just imposes disadvantage on all enemies attacking you for that round, but it takes your action to dodge. We get to do it as a bonus action, which is a nice tanky feature. And we also get Step of the Wind, which lets us dash or disengage as a bonus action, instead of, again, as an action, which can be good if if the mage is far away at the beginning of combat, we really need to get up to him. That's a nice way to do that. And especially because we get unarmored movement as a level 2 monk as well, which allows us to increase our move speed by 10 feet. And that's really nice for getting to the back line where the spellcasters usually hang out, right? And sticking to our targets if they're able to try and get away from us. Monks get the best move speed of any class in game, and it's really nice to have. At level 4, we are a monk 3. We get the Deflect Missiles feature, which is a nice tanky option. It's the first use of our reaction that comes up for us. So against ranged weapon attacks, we can use our reaction to reduce damage by... It's a D10 plus our dex mod plus our monk level, which at this level, that will reduce most attacks to nothing. If somebody's shooting a crossbow or a longbow at you or whatever. And that is fantastic. A nice little tanky feature. Now, you can, and it's really cool, of course, right? Deflecting the arrow as it comes at you. Now, you can spend a key point and catch the arrow and throw it back at the opponent. But I would save those key points because, again, we don't have a ton of them, and we really want them to help us lock down and take out those casters. So we're going to need them because at level 3 monk, we get our monastic tradition, our subclass, and we are, as you have probably deduced, going Way of Shadow. I love this subclass so much. It makes you feel like a ninja, or our Americanized interpretation of a ninja, or maybe Nightcrawler, right? It's perfect for our purposes. So at level 3, Shadow Monks get Shadow Arts, the Shadow Arts feature, which gives us the Minor Illusion cantrip, which can be great for utility, or to distract or disguise or cause other hijinks. But then also as an action, we can spend 2 key points. Why not 1? Come on, wizards. It's not like monks are so powerful. 2 key points to cast a few spells. We get Darkness, Dark Vision, Pass Without a Trace, which is great for stealth for your whole party. And most important for us, I think, Silence. The Silence spell won't totally shut casters down, but it will if you get them. It's a 20-foot radius bubble of silence. And if a caster is within it and the spell that they're trying to cast has a verbal component, they can't cast it, right? Most spells have verbal components, not all of them. But that will stop most spells from being cast, at least within that zone of silence. It's a nice soft shutdown, I think, on casters. It will force them, at the very least, to move. They might not even have enough movement to get out of it, depending on where they are and where you cast it. But even if they can, it's going to force them to move before casting, likely getting them closer to your allies or yourself, for that matter, and thereby taking damage, or maybe even forcing an opportunity attack against them if they want to get out of the silence bubble to cast a spell. So that's really nice and lets us check off the shutdown spells box of our list of things that we need out of an anti-mage. At level 5, we are Monk 4. We get our first ability score increase or feat, and I'm going to recommend that we bump our dexterity to an 18. We get so much out of dexterity: additional armor class, more damage, more reliable attacks so that they will land and thereby potentially, interrupt a caster. Of course, it increases our initiative. It increases all of our roguey skills like stealth and disarming, traps, and sleight of hand, and all of that stuff. We also get Slow Fall at this level, which is one of those abilities that makes you feel so super awesome when you actually get to use it in game. Unfortunately, you probably don't get to use it as much as we wish that we could, but anyway, it's really cool. It just lets you reduce the damage that you take from falling, and unless you're falling from a really big height, it will typically reduce it to 0. And it's fun and awesome when you get a chance to use it. Drop down out of the rafters and ambush your mage victim. At level 6, we are a Monk 5. And it's a very important level for us. So we get extra attack, right, for more damage. So now when we take the attack action, we get to attack twice, with that rapier giving us more opportunities to land sneak attack damage and things. Our unarmed strike goes from a D4 to a D6, so again, more damage there. And we get our most important ability, I think, from monks, Stunning Strike. This is probably what we want to be spending most of our key points on. So if there's an enemy mage that you're going up against especially, and it's the thing, in my opinion, that makes monks so good as an anti-mage archetype. So when you hit an enemy with a melee weapon attack, and yes, unarmed strikes count as melee weapon attacks, look it up in Sage Advice Compendium if you need to, you can spend a key point to try and stun them. And you could do this theoretically 4 times in a round. You only have 5 key points, so hopefully you don't have to do that. But, attack, extra attack, unarmed strike, spend a key point for flurry of blows, another unarmed strike. You would get 4 attacks in a round, and on each one of them you can try to stun them. You got to spend a key point every time. I wish maybe you can convince your dungeon master to not force you to have spent the key point if the stun doesn't stick, because your target does get to make a saving throw, a constitution save, against your DC. And your DC, your difficulty check, is based on your wisdom score, which is actually a good argument for bumping wisdom before dexterity, because we do get armor class from wisdom as well. It would lower our damage, but worth considering. Anyway, when you make a melee weapon attack, you spend a key point, you attempt to stun them. If they fail their save, they are stunned, and this is the best part, until the end of your next turn. So you stun them now, they're stunned for the entire round, and then again on your turn, they're still stunned at the beginning. You can try to make more attacks against them. You'll have advantage on them, which is fabulous because they're stunned. And you can try and stun them again if you have the key points. And so theoretically, you could lock this character down from 1 to 100 to 0, right? You could stun lock them, as it were, and keep them from moving, keep them from making actions or reactions, and all attacks against them have advantage, and they are incapacitated, which means if they were concentrating on a spell, they lose concentration, right? So check that box for a reliable way to break concentration on casters. Stunning is super important, and admittedly, against most monsters, it can be difficult to pull off because so many monsters that you fight, especially the powerful ones, have a high constitution bonus, right? And so they will often not fail that con save. But most casters do not have a particularly high plus to their con saves, and so they make very ideal and juicy and delicious targets for us to be stun locking down and keeping them in place, doing more damage, and interrupting their concentration. You should be able to get it off fairly reliably. Okay, so damage report for level 6. Like I said, I'm just going to look at kind of how we would do against spell damage. I picked Fireball because it's a pretty common and iconic spell. And so against a DC 14, difficulty check 14 Fireball of the 3rd level, which is the highest that, that a character our level could cast right now, assuming that got cast on us every single round, we would take 15 damage per round. We'd have a 15 DTPR, and our rounds to die would be only 3. That's not very good, I know, but it is about to get a lot better. By comparison, the other 3 tank builds that I've done thus far, and you can look at the graphs. I've updated the graphs now for Master's tank builds or whatever comparison. Check it out in the show notes or the video description. Those other 3, the Tankadin, the Armorer, and the Bear Totem Barbarian, all actually outperform us here at this level as far as surviving a never-ending fireball barrage, but not for long. And, of course, they are much worse than we are at getting to and sticking on an enemy caster and, keeping them shut down when they get there. All right, at level 7, we are a Monk 6. Our movement speed goes up another 5 feet. Fantastic. So now we are at, 45 movement speed. That's great. And we get key-empowered strikes, which makes our unarmed strikes magical for the purpose of overcoming resistance to non-magical attacks. And we get my very favorite Shadow Monk ability, Shadow Step. It's super awesome. So when you are in dim light or darkness, as a bonus action, doesn't even require key points, as a bonus action, you can teleport up to 60 feet to an unoccupied space that you can see that is also in dim light or darkness. You then have advantage on the first melee attack you make before the end of the turn. Okay, Nightcrawler. Now, you won't always, the place you're trying to get won't always be in dim light or darkness, right? However, you, as a Shadow Monk, can cast the Darkness spell for 2 key points. So in a pinch, as an action, you could cast Darkness and then teleport to it. Preferably, obviously, close to the mage, right? So this is going to be a great way to sort of get out of any snares that the mage may throw at you that you somehow failed to, resist, and or close the gap to get to that enemy mage quickly, especially if they, manage to teleport away from you or something. Super cool, super fun to use, makes you feel awesome. Okay, at level 8, Monk 7, you get 2 really great anti-mage abilities here. First off, evasion. We've been waiting for this one for a long time, so now we can really just laugh at enemy fireballs and even dragon breath attacks and things like that, other than white dragons, because that's a con save. Anyway, whenever it's a spell effect or you're making a dex save to avoid taking damage from an area effect thing, whether it's a spell or even like a trap or something, you have basically, if you fail the save, you only take half damage. If you succeed on the save, you take no damage. And that is huge for us because against spells, remember, we have advantage on the saving throw to begin with because we're UNT pureblood. We have a high saving throw to begin with because our dex is really good. And, 0 damage if we succeed, half if we fail, which we really won't be almost ever. We also get stillness of mind as monks here, which is great. As an action, it lets you end a charm or fear effect on yourself. Lots of mages have charm and fear abilities, and non-mages as well, I guess. But now we don't really even care that much if we fail our save, which we won't very often because we have a pretty good wisdom score and advantage against, those things if they're spells anyway. But even if they land for whatever reason on our next turn, we can just end it with an action. And that's awesome. At level 9, we are a Monk 8. We need to get some rogue levels, but I really wanted to get this ability score increase and cap our dexterity. So that's what we're going to do with the ability score increase that we get here. And it lets us get another key point. So that's important because, now at least we have 8. That feels, since they renew on a short rest, that feels like we can use a lot of them in every combat encounter and sort of have them dependably when we need them for the most part, as long as we're not using flurry of blows and, just wasting our key points all the time. With a 20 dexterity, our armor class is an 18 now, getting better. And let's do a damage report. So against our proverbial never-ending fireball barrage, a 15 DC fireball now, and it's a level 5 fireball, because that's what a caster of our level would be able to cast at us. We would take, on average, 1 damage per round, and our rounds to die would be 66, because that's how many hit points we have. That's more like it. The Tankadin and the Bear Barbarian are dead in 8 rounds at this level, and the armor in 7. So, suck it, other tanks. All right, at level 10, we are a Rogue 2. Our Anti-Mage has decided to pause in their pursuit of the shadow arts and return to their roguish ways for a time, to maybe apply the skills that they've learned to their trade, and maybe even see if they can't find new ways to use the arcane arts that they have thus far been dabbling in. So at Rogue 2, we get Cunning Action, which lets us dash or disengage or hide as a bonus action. We could already dash or disengage as a bonus action by spending a key point. Now we don't have to do that, so this is much better. At level 11, we are a Rogue 3. Our sneak attack damage goes up to 2d6 once per turn. and we get our roguish archetype. And I think we ought to go Arcane Trickster. I think it fits really nicely with the theme of the character. We're kind of fighting fire with fire here with some spells. And we've kind of been dabbling in these shadow arts anyway, and learning some magical skills. So anyway, this gives us some nice benefits. Arcane Trickster does. We get Mage Hand for with some kind of additional utility added onto it, which I won't get into. But then we also get 2 other wizard cantrips. I would take Prestidigitation for 1, and this is why. And I should have talked about this earlier when I was talking about Shadow Step. You have to be in dim light or darkness and then teleport yourself to dim light or darkness. You can cast darkness where you're going if you need to. But if you're not in dim light or darkness and there's no dim light or darkness around you, what do? You need a solution. Some people would say that you could use your minor illusion cantrip that you get as a shadow monk to just minor illusion yourself in dim light. And now you're in dim light and you can bamf away. I think you could make that argument. You might have to have that conversation with your DM. You could probably also argue that, like, if there's a torch or something, you could, minor illusion, a dark glass bubble around that torch and kind of dim the light. I don't know why you couldn't necessarily, but, when in doubt, discuss with your DM. And I guess for that reason, just in case they say, I don't like that, take Prestidigitation as one of your cantrips, because Prestidigitation, you can snuff out a candle or a torch or even a bonfire, or a campfire anyway. And so if you're in a dungeon and there's lots of torches creating bright light, well, you can snuff one of them out and now you've got a nice little dim light patch. So that's really good. The other cantrip I would take would be Booming Blade. Booming Blade, I would, if you're out of key points, and so you can't stun your target because you're out of key points, or maybe you don't want to, for some reason, try to stun them. Maybe you think they have a high constitution or they're resistant to stuns or something like that. Booming Blade can be a nice sort of soft snare to discourage them from running away, because again, when you cast Booming Blade, you make a weapon attack, and then they are sheathed in this sonic energy, and if they move, they're going to take additional damage if they move of their own free will, I guess. And so, no, it's not going to prevent them from moving necessarily, but it's going to be just a further discouragement to them moving away, because they're going to take extra damage if they do, in addition to an opportunity attack if they're just, not teleporting or something. It is overall less damage than just making 2 weapon attacks and an unarmed strike. So I would probably only use Booming Blade in the above scenario, but it might be nice to have in a pinch. You also, as an Arcane Trickster, get 3 first-level mage spells. 2 of them have to be from the enchantment or the illusion school, and I freaking hate that. I should have brought that up in our Sliding Into My DMs episode last week, where we talked about house rules. This is something that I would absolutely want to see house ruled. If you're being an Eldritch Knight or an Arcane Trickster with the intent of sort of being able to pick up some cool magical abilities, I hate that they get limited to a couple of schools of magic. That's me. I would house rule that crap. But anyway, so take what you want for the illusion or enchantment school spells here as first level spells. There's some okay control options that I don't think they're particularly useful for us at our level, by this point, and with our low intelligence score, because they're intelligence based for like DCs and stuff. For the third spell that you take that does not have to be from one of those 2 schools, I would probably go with Absorb Elements. We've talked about it a lot on this show. It lets you, as a reaction, when you take fire, ice, poison, which we're immune to, acid, thunder damage, lightning, anyway, elemental damage, it lets you be resistant to that damage. which is great for us, right? If you run into a spell that does not allow you to use your evasion, because it's not a dex save, right? And it's elemental like this, and or on the off chance that we fail our saving throw, on a dex save, it just is a nice way to reduce a lot of different spell damage types. Not all, obviously. There's other damage types from spells, force damage and psychic damage and things, but this is going to help a lot on a lot of different spell attacks and even dragon breaths and things like that. At level 12, we are a rogue 4, and we get another ability score increase or feat. I would bump our wisdom to 18. It's important for our stunning strike, right? To land that stunning strike, or make sure that it sticks, because it raises the difficulty check for the enemy. And it raises our own saves for a lot of, control type spells that a wizard may throw at us. And it bumps our armor class too. So now we're a 19 armor class. That's pretty good. Not to mention that if you are functioning as the party's rogue, having a high perception score is pretty important for, locating traps and hidden doors and things like that. So wisdom is good. At level 13, we are a rogue 5. We get our sneak attack up to a 3d6 once per turn. Fantastic. And we get uncanny dodge, which is a big, big deal for us. It's a fantastic ability. It improves our tankiness. If you can see the attack and it lands, then you can use your reaction to have the damage against you. Basically giving you resistance to that damage, whatever the damage is, as long as you can see it coming, for that one attack. Now, it would work great against a caster who is using a spell attack spell, right? Not like a fireball area attack, but they're actually making an attack roll like an Eldritch Blast or something like that. It's a bummer you can only do it to one attack per turn. If they have multi-attacks, you only get one reaction, and so you can have the one. So pick wisely which one you're going to reduce the damage on. But it is especially nice against a big hit. Damage report for level 13 against a DC 16 never-ending fireball, at level 7 fireball. Again, we're taking 1 damage per round, and we are surviving for 94 rounds at that rate. So on the rare occasion that you fail your save against a fireball, you'd still only take 10 damage on average because you have it even on a failed save, and you could further reduce it with absorb elements to 5. So we're super awesome against those types of spells especially, and most types of spells with our advantage on our saving throws and everything. By comparison, the Tankadin was dead in 10 rounds, the Bear Totem Barbarian in 9, and the Armorer at 8. So we do fare very well against spells in general. At level 14, we are a Rogue 6, and we get another round of expertise, which is great. Pick a couple more skills that you are proficient in, double the proficiency for them. So pick whichever you find yourself using most often. At level 15, we are a Rogue 7. This is an important level for us. We get evasion again. It's too bad it doesn't stack. But our sneak attack goes to 4d6. And, I don't want to underestimate the importance of finding ways to bump our damage, right? We are, after all, supposed to be a mage killer and not just a mage annoyer. And so we do decent damage at this point to casters especially, in addition to being able to stick to them like glue and shrug off their spells. The main reason I wanted to get to Rogue 7 was because now Arcane Tricksters get second level spells. There's some really good ones for us here. And we've got, more spell slots now, so it feels like we can cast them when we need them. Again, 2 of these spells that we get at this level have to be from the enchantment and the illusion schools, but unlike level 1, there's some really nice options in those schools for us here. Mirror Image is nice and one that we talk about a lot. It lets you summon 3 sort of images of yourself, and then when somebody makes an attack against you, they potentially attack one of the mirror images instead of you. It's great because it doesn't require our concentration. It really helps our tankiness against targets that are making single target attacks against us. Blur, I like even more. It's a concentration spell. You cast it, and then it imposes disadvantage on all attacks against you, as long as you maintain your concentration. That's fantastic for our tankiness. And Misty Step, I think, would be a good one to consider. If you're in bright light and your DM is not okay with the minor illusion dim light around me, and you're maybe outside, so it's the sun shining down on you, and you can't like snuff out a torch to create dim light or something like that. It's just a good teleport option to have in a pinch. And then there is Hold Person, which some of you love this spell, and I understand why. It can be really good. It's fantastic because it paralyzes the target, which is better than a stun. All hits against a paralyzed target automatically crit. Automatic criticals. The problem is it takes an action to cast. You're not a sorcerer, so you don't have meta magic quicken spell options to cast it, right? It requires your concentration. They get to make a wisdom save to resist it, and they get to make it every round. And a lot of casters will have a high plus to wisdom, and keep in mind that because this is an arcane trickster spell, it's using your intelligence for the difficulty check. So the likelihood of it sticking is kind of slim, I think, against most casters. So I'm probably not going to take that. Plus, we can stun them, which is not quite, but almost as good, and do a lot more damage while we're at it. So, at level 16, you are a rogue 8, and we get our final ability score increase. I want to cap our wisdom. That feels great to have a 20 dex and a 20 wisdom. Now our armor class is at a 20 naked, which is just cool. And, we have a lot of ways to resist damage, especially magical damage. But really, at this point, we've got a full suite of tank skills and spells. We're actually a pretty decent general tank, and, especially, of course, against magic damage. At level 17, kind of a tough call here, whether we go rogue or monk. Rogue 9 would be great. It would get us another d6 to our sneak attack damage. And it gives you the magical ambush feature from Arcane Trickster. It gives you, if you are hidden when you cast a spell on someone, it gives them disadvantage on their resistance to the spell. So maybe if you took Hold Person and you wanted to have a better chance at it sticking, that might be a decent option for you there. Personally, I'd go back to Monk for 2 reasons. I really want more key points. You can never get enough. But also, you get an unarmored movement speed benefit, which lets you run up vertical surfaces and across liquids. And it's just one of the coolest things in the game, in my opinion. I can never get enough of this. Please, Dungeon Master, give me a mage that dimension doors to the top of a column or across a big pond and thinks they're safe, and let me just like dash and get to them and just continue to shut them down and make them feel like, I cannot get away from this freaking anti-mage. Give me this one thing. Anyway, super cool, and I love it. So final damage report, level 17 against a 9th level fireball, DC 17. We're still just taking 1 damage per round, and our rounds to die are 120. But okay, who uses a 9th level spell slot to cast Fireball? Nobody. That's who. So fine. Meteor Swarm. Okay. A never-ending just meteor storm. The planet that we live on passed through an asteroid belt. I don't know. But anyway, round after round of meteors, 17 DC. Meteor Swarm does 40 d6 of damage, and you make a dex save against it, right? Now, 20 of the DC is bludgeoning, and 20 of it is fire. Now, we can make our dex save and take no damage. Doesn't matter what the damage type is. So still, against Meteor Swarm, on average, we are taking 4 damage per round. And it takes us 30 rounds to die of nonstop meteor bombardment. Guess how long it takes the other tanks to die in this scenario. So you've got the Bear Totem Barbarian. They do the best because they are resistant to both fire and bludgeoning damage, right? And they've got the best dex of the tanks that I've done so far. So they're still taking 60 damage per round. And their RTD, their rounds to die, is 4. The Paladin tank, they get to, thanks to their aura, they get to add their charisma modifier to their saving throw. And we'll let them use the Absorb Elements spell, which I've been doing when I've been calculating thus far, by the way. Because they do get access to that. So that only lets them resist the fire damage, though, not the bludgeoning damage. So their damage taken per round is 84. And they're dead in 3 rounds. And similarly, the Armorer, they do get, they don't have dex proficiency. Their dex is lousy, but they do get to add 4 to their save as a reaction thanks to the War Magic feature, but they have fewer hit points. So anyway, they get to use Absorb Elements too. They're taking 81 damage per round, and they're dead in 3 rounds. So my previous tank builds are very vulnerable to area of effect spell damage. I've got to go revisit them and make sure I pick up the Shieldmaster feat or something, right? Final thoughts. Funny enough, I didn't intend to do this when I started out, but this build ended up very closely resembling the very first character that I ever played in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. And, that character was more focused on damage than being like an anti-mage per se. But it was really fun to relive some things as I sort of recreated this character. I do remember one glorious moment in that campaign. There was a time where there was an enemy party waiting in ambush for us, and I managed to stealth in and sort of get behind enemy lines, and I found an enemy caster. They were hiding behind the curtain, actually, and I got the jump on them, got a surprise round off, and took him from 100 to 0 in a single turn, and he never got to cast a single spell, and it was so awesome and memorable and fun. And I think probably inspired me a little bit as I created this character, that memory. So, as always, talk to your Dungeon Master before you play this character in your Dungeon Master's campaign. Let them know kind of the goal that you have, why you're creating the character, and your intent to be this anti-mage. A good DM will find ways to give you lots of options to feel cool and powerful in game, by throwing lots of different casters and caster types and things at you that will make it feel like, oh gosh, it's a good thing I'm here because I really am helping out my party, right? The bad DM will say, oh, you're going to be an anti-caster. Okay, in that case, I'm going to try and counter you and only throw a bunch of, melee monsters at you that don't ever cast spells, and you'll be sad. My biggest regret with this build was not finding a good way to pick up counterspell and or dispel magic. More levels in Arcane Trickster would have got us there, but it was too much of an investment for me and would have delayed our monk levels forever and or just not even gotten us where we wanted to be with monk. It's an option if you just have to have that, but I don't think Arcane Tricksters get it until level 13, third level wizard spells. I almost, instead of going Arcane Trickster, I almost went into like a pure caster class, probably Shadow Sorcerer, which would be great thematically and give us some cool options and things, but ultimately it would have been a lot less damage, sustainable damage. It would have been, worse hit points, worse tankiness, and obviously we wouldn't have the same level of sort of roguish utility. And so, I decided against it. It kind of felt like between our ability to teleport and really stick to the mage like glue and then lock them down with stuns and silence in a pinch, we did a pretty good job at sort of preventing them from casting spells in the first place, which is really sort of the purpose of having counterspell, right? There's definitely an anti-mage build that would focus on you just kind of standing in the back lines and just negating and countering and preventing and dispelling, an enemy mage's magical effects and spells and things. I think it's probably an abjuration wizard, maybe a war mage, warcaster, war magic wizard. But that's a very different character, right? And not where I wanted to go with this one. But check it out if that's something else that you kind of have in mind. But so yeah, not having counterspell didn't cause me to lose too much sleep due to the way that we ended up building the character. A little sleep, admittedly. But speaking of alternatives, so I promised an alternative. If you wanted something that was maybe a little less Nightcrawler ninja and a little more plate and shield, condemn the heretic witches, anti-mage. And really, it's basically just an Oath of the Ancients paladin. So you'd have some really nice advantages going Oath of the Ancients. You get shield and plate mail from the get-go, which gets you to a 20 armor class a lot earlier, as soon as you can afford that plate mail anyway. Combined with your better hit points, you just are a better sort of general tank, or at least you have better general tankiness early on against, weapon damage and things like that. You also do, though, get to check a lot of the boxes on our anti-mage checklist. Your channel divinity and your spell list give you some nice snare options to sort of hold them in place, lock them down. You do pick up Misty Step at 5th level for teleport ability. If you need to close the gap, if they're getting away, if they're in the back line. You do get Dispel Magic eventually, if not Counterspell, but that's still a really nice to have. Most importantly, with the Oath of the Ancients Pally, your auras are phenomenal. Your Aura of Protection at level 6 gives you, lets you add your Charisma modifier to all of your saving throws and your allies too, if they're within 10 feet of you, so that's fantastic, right? And you get the Aura of Warding, which gives you resistance to all spell damage. So, combine that with your UNT advantage against saving throws, you get a buff to your saving throw, and if somehow you fail and still take damage, well, you have resistance to all of that damage. So you're barely going to feel warm when those mages throw their fireballs. Assuming that you work Shieldmaster into the Shieldmaster feat into your build, by comparison, at level 17, that Meteor Swarm damage, you're going to be taking about 14 damage per round on average, and you'll survive it for 14 rounds. So not quite as good against spells specifically as the build that we ended up with, but maybe a nice compromise between sort of your traditional tank, the other tank builds that I've created, and this kind of specific, very focused Mage Slayer that we ended up with. So anyway, that is our show for the week. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Again, please subscribe and like and comment and all of the things. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on Twitter. And, as always, if you have a build that you'd really like me to do an episode on, please let me know however you can, and give me as much detail as you can and what role you want that character build to fill, and I will do my best to optimize it. Thanks so much, guys. Love you, and I hope you have just a fantastic day. Talk to you soon.